running a little bit behind, but I'm Nina Shah, and I'm going to be the moderator today. And I want to briefly introduce you to the panelists, but I'm going to give a little bit of an introduction to what this panel is about first. So today we're going to be talking about different jobs in STEM, which is science, technology, engineering, and mathematics. And these are all subjects that you'll have more exposure to in college if you haven't already done so. Many of the panelists today, actually all of the panelists now, we had one unfortunately have to drop out, but they all work in biotechnology, which is an example of when you use these subjects, science, engineering, technology, and mathematics to make things like medicines. And then doctors can use these medicines to help people treat a variety of illnesses, from things like the everyday flu to things like breast cancer. So all of our panelists today work in different parts of biotechnology. They've contributed in their own way, and I'm really excited to introduce you to them. So we have Dr. Yvonne Nyavor, and just make sure that I pronounce that correctly. It was good?
Yes, that was fantastic. Great job.
I got a little help from my friend. We also have Cecilia's son, and she works in business development and strategy. And I forgot to say that Dr. Nyavor is a principal scientist. And then we also have Priya Subramanian, who's a director of IT. So I am going to get started on the actual panel, but I thought it would be a fun idea for us to do a little bit of an icebreaker. I think it always just loosens everyone up. So my question to you, completely unrelated to anything STEM, all of you feel free to chime in any order. If you had a chance to meet anyone famous, who would it be? And I guess I'll start with you, Cecilia.
Oh, that's a tough question. Anyone famous, alive or no longer alive, right? Just anybody famous.
Anyone famous.
Okay. My mind goes to Rosalind Franklin, who helped discover DNA. So she is a female scientist who worked with Watson and Crick, or some would say, right, really her discoveries enabled the discovery of DNA by Watson and Crick. And if you don't know about her, please look her up. Her work really contributed to our understanding of genetics and genetic medicines, and really pioneered this really entire field in the early, I would say, 1900s. So it'd be interesting to talk to her and understand her life path up until then, and if she could know where her discovery, how her discovery contributed to science as we know it today. I'd be really interested in her perspective.
It's an awesome choice. What about you, Priya?
I think one is hard to pick. I'm going to go with two choices. One is I'm a big fan of Beatles, so it's going to be like, John Lennon or Paul McCartney. I think they are probably one of the brilliant musicians in that time, to have worked with a different genre of music, to incorporate rock and modern country music, all kinds of styles. So it would be one of the Beatles. Lead singer, a lead musician, and the second one would be Abraham Lincoln. I was recently in, I like Lincoln for his visionary plan. That kind of like, I think Lincoln and Washington are great presidents, but in that time, to think about a policy to abolish slavery or something to spread equality. I think that's visionary. The world could use more of leaders like that.
I couldn't agree more, especially at a time when everything was working against you to do that.
Exactly. Yeah. Just to have the thought and to follow up on that, to implement it, and to kind of look back and see the development the progress that we have all made. So I thought Lincoln is someone who I'd like to see in person. I did see him in Disneyland in California.
I've been to Disneyland so many times. I've never seen him. I guess I have to look for him next time.
Oh, you know what? There is this show called The Greatest Moments with Lincoln, where they have like a lifelike statue of Lincoln that actually, Lincoln comes and speaks his most famous quotes and words. It's a pretty cool show.
Awesome. Cool. No pressure to you, Dr. Nyavor, but these are some pretty good choices. So
yeah, those are some pretty solid choices. I would, if I were to go with one, I'd say Rosa Parks, just because I'm curious what was going through her mind when she refused to give up her seat. There has been speculation about the reason, which, a comedian once joked she was probably just tired and didn't want to get up. So I'm curious. I would want to talk to her in that moment and just, right after, and find out, did you do this on purpose, or was it just, you were tired and you kind of was she intending to start a whole civil rights movement from that one action? It would be an interesting conversation.
That was really well thought out for the 10 seconds I gave you guys to answer that. Okay, so I'm going to get started on the panel now. And one of, just for a little bit of background, one of the most important pieces of advice that I've ever received is that it's simply not a straight path to figuring out what you want to do with your life, whether that's some type of job or just a career in general. And I think that's something you'll see amongst all three of these panelists today, is that in some way, shape, or form, their paths weren't straight as well. And most people in general kind of have to take some sort of pause to think about what direction they really want to go. And so throughout our discussion today, I also want to make sure all of you in the audience can get all of your questions answered. So we're going to have a Q&A at the end of the panel, but if you have any questions during the panel, feel free to put it in the chat. And then Laura, our chapter chair, will actually go through the questions at the end so that the panelists can answer them.
Just put it in the Q&A, not the chat.
In the Q&A. Thanks, Laura. Okay, Priya, I'm going to start with you. So you're now the director of IT at Arrakis, right? But you started your education back in India in engineering. And then 4 years later, you decided to get a master's degree in informatics. So my first question to you is, could you please explain what IT is and why it's important for any company, but biotech in general?
Sure, yeah. So at Arrakis, or any of the biotech, when you say IT is the team that is responsible for maintaining all the systems and services, the security, the scalability, the reliability, and the availability of those systems. So that's like a summary of my job responsibilities. I get to work with cross-functionally different groups. Most of them could be like scientists, because I work in a research-heavy company. So they're all either laboratory-based scientists or computational scientists. And then there are this general and administration groups in a company, like finance, business development, HR. These are groups that every company has in its backbone to support the research or their clinical trial or their product, advance further. So in IT, you get to cross-functionally interact and collaborate with the whole company, supporting them with any tools that they need, and making sure that there is an infrastructure to support the research development, whether it's on-premise, which we call in the IT world, when you say on-premise, it's physically a room in the company where the servers and all the networking equipment are located. Or it could be in the cloud, which is the choice for computational chemistry or computational biology, or any kind of computational group and data science group. They prefer using a lot of resources in the cloud, whether it's Amazon's cloud or Google or Microsoft, because it's just easier to go and provision a server and get going, as opposed to back in the days where you have to order a server and wait for it to come and then wait for someone to configure it. So it's like supporting systems and services on premise and the cloud, and ensuring the security aspect of all these systems and services. That's like the responsibility of IT as a team.
And is this what you always wanted to do? So when you went to school for engineering, did you envision yourself being in IT in the future?
So when I did civil engineering in my bachelor's, and I did that because I did not get admitted into, like, you need to score a certain level to get into a course, what they call a circuit course. It's either electrical engineering, electronics, computer science, or instrumentation and control. And when I couldn't score that much, one of the choices that I had was civil or mechanical. And I chose civil because, it's probably like more easier being a woman to sit and do some structures and calculations and drawing. And I was good in math. So I said that, okay, I'll choose civil over mechanical because I don't want to deal with heavy machinery and equipment. However, 2 years into civil engineering, when I was doing a project in a structural engineering department in a college, I was doing an internship. I developed a tool in a computer science language called C++ in a programming language. And I built this tool for the professor to support repetitive calculations to make it more efficient. And the professor gave me this advice that, I've seen your structural work and I've seen your computer science work. Maybe you should pursue a career in computer science. And I'm kind of grateful for that piece of advice. And then I started taking more computer science courses. And then I got a job as a software programmer after I graduated. I worked for 3 years as a coder in a multinational company, and then after that, after doing 3 years of coding, writing lines and lines of code, I kind of realized that, I want to now get a broader expertise in IT. I want to be able to go and work with some servers and networking equipment and things like that. So I thought IT would be like the branch to explore into. And that's how I did my master's in Northeastern. I did a variety of courses, some programming courses, some policy making courses, a lot of hands-on networking and computer programming languages. And that's how I found my footing in the IT of biotech industry.
So you feel like there's a lot of crossover with the work that you initially did as a civil engineer and then as a software engineer, and now some of it's crossing over into IT?
Yeah, so not much in the civil engineering fields, but definitely in the engineering mindset, because when we are building a software application, we are kind of engineering different modules so that mathematical thinking helps a lot in solving a problem. So absolutely, I would say yes.
That's awesome. Dr. Nyavor, I'm going to move on to you. So after your PhD program, you completed a postdoctoral, or you completed your postdoctoral work, and then you started working in biotech full-time. Did I get that right?
That is correct. So I finished my PhD in neuroscience, studying how bacteria that live inside our guts influence the development of some neurodegenerative diseases, and also worked some on obesity and diabetes research, kind of how that's linked to the gut microbiome. So it was very cool work. And then I got the opportunity to do my postdoc after that, looking at how the gut microbiomes, again, gut bacteria that live in the gut of pre-kindergarten children, influences their neurodevelopmental progress, and how that kind of affects their outcomes in school. So it was very cool work.
I was going to ask you, and you touched upon it a little bit, but what is the gut microbiome and what type of diseases are linked to it?
That's a really good question. So the gut microbiome is considered a collection, basically, or a community, really. It's an ecosystem of different types of microorganisms. We can see these organisms with our naked eye, but they are literally billions of them living on our bodies, in our bodies, and specifically for the gut. The gut is the richest ecosystem of them, and there's literally billions of organisms that live inside of our guts right now. And I always jokingly say that they are basically our bosses because they contribute so much to our health and just ongoing wellness. And so when you consider a very simple process, such as making an essential vitamin like vitamin K, if you don't have the presence of gut microbes in your intestines, you can't actually produce vitamin K. They are the ones responsible for making this essential vitamin. So that's one really good example that goes to show how important they are to our health. They're linked to the development of a healthy immune system. They are linked to the development of healthy brain function. They're linked to the development of multiple diseases. At this point, I'm not aware of any disease that does not have a link to the microbiome. at this point, we can say quite confidently that it's either a disease impacts the microbiome or the microbiome impacts a disease, but there's definitely a relationship between the two across almost all of the human health conditions you can think about, especially when it comes to more serious conditions like neurodegenerative disorders, or even just, you can think about gastrointestinal related diseases like Crohn's disease, that we have some links. We're not clear on exactly what's going on, but we know there's a relationship. So that it's a very, very cool field of research. If anyone is interested in learning more, it kind of touches everything you can think about when it has to do with human health.
I was going to +1 on that because it's one of my favorite topics to learn about. The gut is, I agree, connected to absolutely everything in your body. Is this something that you were thinking about in high school? I mean, did you have any idea about the gut in high school?
No. Short answer, no. As a field, the gut microbiome, or just, the microbiome itself as a field of study, has really, really grown and exploded in the past, I will say 20 years or so. So when I was in high school, it definitely was not a thing, number one. I may not look it, but I'm older than I may look. And that's so, and then I also actually was born and raised in Ghana in West Africa. And so when I was growing up and going to school in Ghana, we really didn't have exposure to emergent research, which is how I would have found out about this. So my exposure to the gut microbiome came much later. I started on my journey always loving life and biology. So I started out just loving biology. And then I found this biology textbook when I was like 11 years old, and read about microorganisms, specifically bacteriophages and viruses. And then I got super, super interested in microorganisms because they just fascinated me. The fact that we can't see these things and they are exerting so much influence on our planet at that point, and on our foods. And I didn't know anything about how they influenced our health, apart from the fact that some of them caused diseases, infectious diseases. So that was all I was exposed to back then in high school. My father was a biologist, which is why I had such a love for biology from a very young age. So when the time came for me to consider what to study in school, I didn't want to be a medical doctor. So I decided to study infectious diseases. So I did a biology program, did some research in infectious diseases and immunology. And then I was asked to come over to the US to Tufts University to continue some of that research on infectious diseases. And so it was while I was at Tufts University and that I actually came across my first paper related to the gut microbiome. And then I was completely fascinated because up until that point, my entire understanding of microbes was that most of them were good, but we had a lot of bad ones and they just caused disease. I didn't really realize we had this very robust community of them living inside of our bodies and on our bodies, and how essential of a role they play in our health, just actually contributing to a healthy status, not causing disease. That was a very revolutionary way of looking at microbes. That was very different from how I was trained back in Ghana to look at most microbes as bad, right? So that's kind of my journey. It was very winding, just as you pointed out in the beginning, Nina. It's not a straight journey. It usually is a very interesting twist and turns adventure to get to where we all are, I think.
Oh, it always is. And I mean, I was working before this, and then I decided to go back to school. So I already have started the windy journey for myself, and looking forward to the continuous winding that's going to occur. So moving on, Cecilia, I have a question for you, last but not least in this section. So in college, you studied biology and economics, and then you got a master's degree in business administration, which is an MBA for all of you listening. And then you worked in finance, investing people's money. And now you work in an exciting biotech company called Nkrumah. And I hear that they are working on a cure for, or a treatment for muscular dystrophy. Is that right?
Yeah, that's correct. DMD and DM1.
Awesome. So can you first touch upon what business development actually is, and then what do you do at Nkrumah?
Yeah, absolutely. So over 50%, 50, of the drugs that we all know and use today are the result of collaboration, and collaboration between companies, between biotech companies and pharmaceutical companies, is what collaborations are about. So many of us have received the COVID vaccines, right? And if you've received the Pfizer vaccine, that's the result of collaboration between Pfizer and a company called BioNTech. So those two companies got together to develop vaccines, and eventually when the pandemic began, they used and leveraged that collaboration to develop the COVID vaccine that some of us have received. So business development is about seeking out partnerships so that two companies can go further, faster, and do more together than either could do alone. And it's my role to make those introductions as well as share the science my company Entrada is doing with the counterpart and have them understand the value that we could bring if we were to collaborate on something together.
But did you know what business development was in high school? Is this something you've always wanted to do?
No, I had no idea what business development was in high school. And I think in different industries, business development means different things. So that description I just gave of business development is true for the biotech industry, but in tech, right, it means something completely different. So in high school, I definitely knew I wanted to be in the biotech industry as a whole, but I didn't know I wanted to do business development. I grew up in California, and I was really, really lucky because in the San Francisco Bay Area, that is the home and heart of biotech. The industry emerged in the San Francisco Bay Area. And I went to a public high school, and I happened to have a teacher who established the first public school biotech program in the entire country. And the textbook, the lab manual is what a lot of public schools use across the country now. So for 3 years in the evenings from 6 until 8 p.m., after athletics, after a full day of school, we would go into the lab, do experiments, learn about what biotech is. So very early on, I had an appreciation for the industry. I think similar to Dr. Nyavor, my dad was also in the biotech industry, and he's a PhD in chemistry. So between the two experiences and living in a geographic area where I was exposed to biotech, the combination of those three things led me to biotech, but only after going through this winding journey that I think a lot of people are, I think, nodding, saying that they also shared, did I arrive at business development as my current destination.
Boston's also kind of like the East Coast version of.
Yeah.
I'm from California. I'm from the Bay Area too, actually.
Oh,
so
nice. I didn't know that.
But it's the audience, you guys listening, this is a great area to live in for getting into STEM for the exact same reasons that Cecilia was just saying. So that's awesome.
Absolutely.
So you took a little bit of a break to work in finance before you came back to biotech, right? Was there a reason for that?
Yeah, so I went to Penn for undergrad and again was very lucky. So Penn had a dual degree program. What that means for those who are looking at colleges is you get 2 degrees in a single program. So I majored in biology and I also majored in finance and healthcare management. And I was in this program, we don't just learn about those fields independently, but we learn about the business of biotech. So I really wanted to work in biotech right out of college. But in looking for jobs by the time I graduated, that wasn't really a job you could immediately graduate from college and jump into. Many people were going to finance from my school as that first step. And I figured finance was a great foundation to learn what we call the hard skills, or a different way to describe that is like the technical skills of understanding the financial market, so the stock market, right? Or understanding how to calculate how a company is valued, or how to project how the sales of a drug would look in the future. All of those skills are what I developed in finance, and then I took those skills and I applied them to my future jobs. So I think from the outside looking in, it definitely looked like a step in a different direction. And I would say it was still a very helpful direction where my intent was to learn something there and apply it later.
Awesome. Great. So I'm going to ask what's called a jump on question now, and anyone can answer it in any order, all of you, hopefully at least one of you. But you all have touched upon not a straight path. I think I've said it 5 times. Not everyone has, or most people don't have a straight path in their career, right? So what type of advice would you give to a student in high school per se, who feels lost, who feels like, I don't know what I'm going to do with my life. I'm going to go to college soon, have all this pressure.
Yeah, my advice to kick things off is to talk to as many people as you can. And the basis for my advice is that in order to have a sense of what you want to do, you need to know first what's possible. And the only way to know what's possible is to talk to a lot of people. And some of those conversations can, lead to ideas, inspiration, right? For what, you could do in college, you could do after college. I know in high school, at my high school, a lot of us did internships. So for a summer, I did research at Stanford, researching bacteria cells. And I didn't know what that experience was going to be like until I actually did it. So talk to a lot of people, with whether it's in biotech, whether it's in STEM, outside of STEM, it doesn't really matter at this point. Just talk to a lot of people to get a lot of ideas. And if you can, whether that's an internship or shadowing someone for a day, get that experience too, to see, what clicks, right? What makes you feel excited? What kind of bores you, right? Getting that sense of yourself is a really great starting point in high school, and continue doing that in college.
Yeah, I think that's great. Anybody else?
I'm going to second the internships too. I actually found a footing in the biotech industry by doing an internship at actually one of the companies that's co-funded by Dr. Laura Aguilar. So I think internships are a great opportunity, whether you're going to be in that industry doing that kind of job or not, but it shows you the practical application of the concepts that you learn in school or college. I think internships are great. And also, we live in an information world. So I think there is a lot of companies who actually, if you go to their websites, let's say that, you're interested in a certain topic, research what are the companies that's working on cutting edge products or services, or research in that particular topic of interest, and look up those companies online and, find who the founder is, and, listen to those people talk about it in either a forum, in a webinar, or you could find those videos, and they can actually lead you down a path of inspiration, or give you some idea what's possible with that particular concept or area of research.
Definitely. And I also just want to add that I agree, internships are great, but if for whatever reason you're unable to get an internship, just attending panels like these or other events, virtual events, and getting as much exposure as you can early on will just kind of, you keep it in your mind. And even if you don't think about it for some time, you'll remember in the future, oh, I remember when I attended that panel, or I attended that activity, and I want to know more. Awesome.
Yeah, I actually was going to say exactly what you just said, Nina, is just if you need a starting point, get involved while you have the opportunities like these panels, other community type events. Just basically be willing to step out of your comfort zone and attend these types of things, because they help to broaden your horizons and help you to think outside the box. And sometimes the path that will lead you where you need to go is not going to look the way you think it should look. And so be willing to just try stuff, and be like, just don't put pressure on yourself and feel like you have to get it right. Is the other aspect of this I would add, is sometimes we feel like I have to get it right. I have to figure out my life right now. I have to have a purpose and everything. And what I will say is, you don't have to. It's really, really okay for you to just actually take it a day at a time, and be involved in doing stuff and trying stuff and meeting people, talking to people. And over time, you realize that your purpose, or whatever you enjoy doing, or whatever you are looking forward to for work or career, is going to emerge out of it. But it's likely not going to look the way you want it to look. So just be kind to yourself. Don't don't think you have to figure it out immediately, right? So just be okay with the uncertain and the unknown, and being willing to try new things is what I would also add to everything that has been said before, which is wonderful. And I will reiterate all of that.
Thank you, guys. Those were all awesome responses. I'm going to just, in consideration of time, move on to the next topic. So we're going to talk a little bit about mentoring and then working up the ladder. And this is another jump on question to just kind of get the thoughts flowing. So does anyone have a teacher or mentor story, or even a friend or family member that kind of you had that person to help you get to where you are today? I know that Priya touched upon her professor in college, but does anyone have anyone else?
I know I definitely do. I think every single step of my journey, I can say without good mentors and people that actually believed in me when I didn't believe in myself, I would not be where I am today. And I always liken this to, again, our knowledge on the gut microbiome, that it's an ecosystem and a community. And so it doesn't take, it's not one organism that is offering all of these beneficial effects. It's actually a community effort. So it really, again, and I come from Africa, the saying originated in Africa that it takes a village to raise a child. It literally does. So it took a village of mentors, professors, teachers who saw something in me that I actually didn't even see in myself. It started with my headmaster when I was like 6 or 7 years old. And since then, I can say that almost every school or institution I've been in, there's been someone who will look at me and see something in me, a new aspect of myself that I didn't even know existed, and give me opportunities to actually build upon that. I currently have that in my workplace with my direct manager, who can see some leadership skills and actually wants to build on that. And then in my previous roles, I've had people who will see things like, oh, you are great at speaking. Why don't you give more presentations or give more talks about research? Or you are great at bringing people together and having, facilitating conversations. Have you considered doing stuff like this? And it's usually, mentoring doesn't necessarily look the way it might look for everyone. It looks very different. So I will say that's the other aspect of it to consider, is some mentoring relationships will last a lifetime. I have some of those, but there are those that also just happen for a short season, and then that's it. For that season of your life, that's your mentor. But I have mentors that I've had my entire life that I really, really would not be where I am today without them.
That's awesome. Does anyone else have anything else to add?
What I would add is that, as you're going through high school, right, notice the teachers, the cheerleaders who see that potential in you, and go to them for advice. Go to them, with questions. And as you're going through high school, through college, right, you might have professors, teaching assistants who see that potential in you, and really notice those moments of when they're motivating you, when they're pushing you in a certain direction, and lean on them. There will be moments, right, when others are critical of you, and notice that too, but really direct your attention to those who see that potential in yourself, because I think those people have potential to be mentors and to see the best in you and help yourself see the best in yourself. So I think as I'm reflecting upon high school and college, right, I don't think I stopped to smell the roses enough to, appreciate all the support network, that ecosystem that really does exist in those environments. After high school, after college, it's a different playing field. There definitely will be, cheerleaders and mentors as you embark upon your career journey. But in the high school and college ecosystems, that's where it's really rich in those who want to develop young people. So those are the times to start establishing those connections and looking for potential mentors.
Agreed. Priya, do you have anything to add?
Yeah, I think, they all have shared great points. You could also look in your family, in your neighborhood. I would say that, look for people like ask about like, what do they work, and, you know, where do they work and what do they do? And like ask questions, and that could, you know, sometime lead you to some interesting topic or work that they do. And it could give you an idea about what kind of companies exist out there, what kind of institutions. It could be a research institution that is for-profit, non-profit. There's so many different kinds of organizations out there, which is all a community on its own. So I would say, like, you know, having conversations on your area of interest, or just asking some time and listening to what they do, could give you a lead, and then you could follow up on that.
Agreed. Okay, so I'm also gonna move on because I realize we only have 20 minutes left. But Dr. Nyavor, you talked earlier a little bit about this. You said that when you didn't really feel like you had it in you to get something done, you had a mentor that helped you out. And the not feeling like you have it in you, there's actually a term for that. It's called imposter syndrome is a form of that. And I'm just gonna define it for everyone in the audience. So imposter syndrome refers to when people, and actually it's often women and other minoritized groups who actually are accomplishing a lot, fear that they're going to be perceived as less accomplished. And so Dr. Nyavor, to get back to you, I actually saw on your LinkedIn, you host a lot of Clubhouse meetings, you hosted a couple of TED Talks in the past, and you did these at kind of a relatively young age, really early in your career. So I can only imagine you probably had a lot of imposter syndrome, right? How did you overcome this?
I'm not sure that you ever actually overcome imposter syndrome. I will say that one of the best books I've read on this, probably everyone here may have heard of it, is from Sheryl Sandberg, called Lean In. It's a really great book to read on the subject, and actually really captures the feelings really well. Until I read it, I thought I was like, I had friends, you know, grad school ladies as well, that we would talk about it. And I knew that they were struggling with similar feelings. But until I read the book, I didn't realize that it was actually so common, and so many of us struggled with this. So I will say that up till date, it's not necessarily something that's completely disappeared, right? It changes and evolves as it's changed and evolved as my career has progressed, is the way I would put it. So right now it may look like, oh man, I've been given this additional responsibility. I don't know if I'm good enough for this. I don't know if I have the skills to do it. And so that might look like I will overcompensate and end up over-performing on a task just to prove that I'm good enough at it. But clearly I was good enough, otherwise I would not have been given the task, right? So one of the things I've learned to do is to believe people when they've told me that you are good enough. And that has been very difficult, especially I think in my case, there were a lot of cultural components to it as well, where I just be like, oh, people are just saying that to be nice. They don't actually mean that you're smart, or that you're good at this, or that you are this accomplished person. That's how I always thought it was just flattery, right? But I forced myself to evaluate it, and I realized it was just imposter syndrome, refusing to let me accept that what people were saying was in fact true. And if multiple people are telling you the same thing, multiple people can't be lying or trying to suck up to you. And obviously, like, you know, flattery, what are they getting out of it? Nothing, right? So it took me a while to realize that I was self-sabotaging I was actually being mean to myself. So one of the other things I learned to do was to ask myself, if myself was a different person in my life, say my younger sister or a friend who came to me struggling with this, would I actually give them would I talk to them the same way I talk to myself? Right. And I'm pausing here because it's really, really important. We tend to treat other people better than we treat ourselves. And that actually shows up in our thoughts about ourselves as well. So I think other people are amazing. I can look at, like, you know, I can be like, oh my gosh, Nina is so smart, so accomplished, she's amazingly intelligent. And then I can look back at myself like, it's just me, you know, I don't have any of those skills. But that's not true. So it really, really required me learning to be kind to myself as much as I'm kind to other people. And again, beginning to really, really accept that I am good enough. And I am this amazing person people describe me as. You know, if you ask my family, they might be like, she's pretty troublesome. Maybe not that, but you get the point. The point I'm trying to make is for professional purposes, right? I am good at what I do, and I have to own that. And it took a really, really long time to get to that point. And I will add just a little bit to that and say, it's okay to feel like you're not good enough, because we all feel it in different aspects of our lives. There isn't, for example, when you get older, some of us will end up having children, some may not, by choice and all of that. But I've heard from people who have kids, when you have your first child, or when you find out you're going to have a child, that imposter syndrome kicks in. You're like, am I actually going to be able to keep a human being alive and raise them and take care of them and actually be a parent to them? So at different phases of our lives, this is going to show up. And it's totally okay. You just need to know that that's what it is and work through it. You just go like, I am not that terrible person I'm imagining in my head, number one, and I am good enough. I got this. I can handle this. So.
Yeah, and you also have to know that when you make mistakes, because everyone makes mistakes, that It's not because you're unqualified. It's because that's just part of learning. Cecilia, I actually had a question for you about that, because you've been in quite a few leadership positions and had a lot of accomplishments that I don't think I have time to list, but I'm sure you've made a lot of mistakes along the way. Everyone makes mistakes. The key is learning from them, as you know. So what are some of the biggest lessons you've learned from the mistakes you've made?
Yeah, absolutely. I think along the way, right? Like if you don't make mistakes, you're not trying new things. And if everything's always successful, then I'd question, whether I've grown from that, right? So in terms of mistakes, I would say not asking for help soon enough or speaking up like loud enough. Oftentimes, especially as a woman of color, right, from an immigrant background, I kind of, put my nose down, put my head down and work through it. I can do this. If someone's asked me to do this, I'm going to do it. And I don't have this tendency, or it's not natural to me to ask for help or to say, actually, I have a boundary here. I can only work so many hours, or I can only get this done by next week, not this week. So looking back on my career, what I wish I would have done sooner is to establish those boundaries or ask for help. What does asking for help look like? It might be, hey, is there someone else who can collaborate on this with me? This workload is unsustainable. I'd like to hire someone, within my group for me to be the manager, because I think the workload has evolved to that point. So those skills were not natural to me. I don't think there's anyone who necessarily teaches us that in school, whether it's, high school, college, or an MBA, business school. Those are learned skills from being on the job. And I would say that sometimes not having that voice or establishing those boundaries has resulted in me overworking myself, and that has an impact on mental health, right? Which is so important, especially given how busy lives are, balancing career as well as personal lives. So that's a skill I wish I had developed sooner.
Yeah, you talked a little bit about being a woman of color,
yeah,
and in fields like biotech is traditionally has been a very largely male-dominated realm of industries. All of the jobs have been in. So I want to talk a little bit about that in a bit. But first, I want to hear from you, Priya. I want to hear a little bit about IT, because we live in a digital age, and I'm sure you have some great job security because of that. But how do you kind of see your field evolving in the next 5 to 10 years?
Yeah, so, things, I guess in IT itself in particular, that applies to actually all other fields too. A lot of equipment that used to be physically in person has all started moving to the cloud now. It used to be that physical premises first and cloud is like a secondary thing. And that's actually swapping now, where the cloud is becoming the primary area where, all the work is happening. So I think developing, and IT is a field that's constantly changing. Every 10 years, there is new technology coming up. And then there is new infrastructure that's needed to support the technology and the tools that needs to be hosted on this environment. So I think the future is going to be all machine learning and AI-backed tools or platform that supports the machine learning and AI to advance any kind of research anyone wants to do. That's becoming the norm right now. All the research companies have their own group for machine learning and AI. Anything that's being done, how can we make it much more efficient, much more faster to process more and more data than it used to happen in the past. That's becoming like the norm. So I think AI is gonna probably like become like more and more common. Not, we already use it in our day-to-day lives. When we go to our banking website, we have a AI to help us out, or it's, so I think that's going to be becoming more and more norm. So I think developing skills to kind of support that progress is going to be really helpful, regardless of any field of computer science or IT or networking, actually, even what it used to be the traditional IT, where the networking was in the physical office, but everything else used to be in the cloud. And that's also changing. Nowadays, one can start a company not having a single piece of equipment actually to support any of the informatics that the company has to work on. So I think cloud computing and AI is, in my opinion, and probably many of you all will agree, is going to be the standard for the next 10 years, at least.
I mean, it sounds like with things like AI and the cloud coming out, IT has a lot of room for growth. Having a career in IT has a lot of room for growth, a lot of potential to learn new things over time. And that's great. That's something that everyone in the audience should keep in mind, is finding careers where they feel like they're going to be able to have a lot of growth and learn a lot of new things. So I'm going to transition actually over to talking a little bit about being women. And also we have a lovely panel full of women of color too. And there's a lot of misconceptions and issues that come being a woman and being a woman of color. So actually UNESCO, an organization, and I don't know what the acronym is, but it released a statistic in 2015 that said that women accounted for less than 1/3, about 29% of those employed in scientific research and development. And then in 2019, that jumped up just slightly, about 1% to 30%. So it is changing, but we have a lot of work to do. So for all of you panelists, maybe it sounds like you guys had a lot of role models to follow, but maybe not always role models that look like you. What type of setbacks have you endured in your field, kind of, as a woman, but also as a woman of color or as a manager? And what did you do to overcome them? And this is a jump on question, so whoever wants to answer, feel free.
I can start. So I would say, like, as a woman of color, right? Like, it's the intersectionality of being a woman as well as being a person of color. There's a lot of expectations or assumptions, implicit bias as to how, we will behave, right? And how, we will come across. And I try to acknowledge that in my own head, but also move past that. Like, I am who I am, and I try to show up however I feel like is genuine to myself. And that sometimes is hard because perhaps someone will have stated an assumption about me that is not true, right? Like, early in my career, I remember my very first job, I was the only person of my 5-member class. So a class is like a group of 5 people who join at the same time, who had previously done the job at a different company. And I remember somebody walking up to me asking me if I had ever worked a desk job. And I'm like, what's a desk job? And the way they described it was, oh, at a computer, like using Excel or using Outlook. And I'm like, oh, but don't you know that I already did this job at a previous company as an internship? And they were like, oh, okay, that's great. I didn't know that. So it sounds like you've done this before. And I'm like, yeah. So are you going to be able to, deliver this? We were doing an analysis by the end of the day. And then I was like, yeah, I already finished it. And they're like, oh, that's surprising. And then I watched the person walk away, and the other 4 people in my class were white men. And this person did not go around asking them if they had worked desk jobs. So I found that like as an interesting teaching moment. This was over 10 years ago, but still it was within the last 10 years. And to receive that question, I thought was like, wow, okay, there's a lot of expectation and assumptions that I'm working against. I try not to treat those as permanent roadblocks, but expectations that I'm going to smash through, right? Like I'm still going to show up as I am. I'm not going to change myself to make someone else feel comfortable, but rather show up genuinely as myself and take up space, because I deserve to be there just as much as those other 4 people. It doesn't really matter how I got there, how they got there. We're all here now. And, I have something valuable to contribute. I'm going to make an impact. And coming in with that perspective, I think is really important. There are times when I also feel imposter syndrome because I don't look like everybody else. I don't sound like everybody else. When we first started using Zoom, I realized women's voices are higher and they don't carry as well on these computers or through Zoom. So I had to adapt. So there's a lot of challenges, I think, women of color face in any industry, in the biotech industry, in the finance industry. And mentally acknowledging it, but moving past it, that combination, if you can keep both in mind, allows us to really not only exist, but also thrive.
Couldn't agree more. In the interest of time, I'm actually just going to move on to the next question. And this is going to be our last question so that we can have some time for you guys to answer any remaining questions. But another jump on question, feel free to chime in, anyone. So end of panel, what is one piece of advice you would give to yourself earlier in your career, knowing everything that you know now?
I'll start.
Go ahead. Go ahead.
Take the time to smell the roses. Just enjoy the journey. Don't be so focused on your destination that you forget to enjoy the journey that you are on, because you will look back one day, you get to your destination and look back and realize you never actually paused to celebrate each milestone, to celebrate accomplishments, to really, really live and enjoy being, just being on this journey that you're on. So that's the advice I would say, is just, be kind to yourself and take the time to just enjoy the journey instead of putting so much pressure on yourself to get to the destination. Because you will get there. I have no doubt in my mind, if you're on this Zoom today, I know you will get there. Just give yourself the space to enjoy the journey as well.
Agreed. Does anyone else have anything to add?
Yeah, I just want to reiterate that there is space for everyone to do something. So I think, the competition is good. I used to be really competitive in school to get grades and marks and get into college, and then to be competitive in college to get into a good job. And at some point I looked back and I realized that I didn't have to do that and I could have still come to the same place. So I would say that don't over pressurize yourself. And also, like, everybody is naturally good at something. Find out what you're really good at. And like, if you're like sitting free, like after 7 p.m., what is something that you would like to watch about? Find that something that you're naturally interested in, naturally good and interested in, and try to find advanced topics in that and do the most difficult thing first. When you have the time in your life, do the most difficult subject, or take college level introductory courses and things like that, whatever you can when you have the time in your life. Now I realize that in my early 40s, I'm seeing that, I'm a mother of 2 kids. And even if I want to do something, that I have other responsibilities to devote that time. So, do what you want to learn. There is no limits. So it could be something that you may not have a career in, but just go after the topic, explore and learn for having fun, just for fun.
That's awesome. Cecilia, do you have anything you would like to add?
I would say and echo what Priya just said, right? Be curious, like ask questions, ask why, how, be a lifelong learner, whether it's to figure out what your career is, figure out what your hobby is, constantly, be asking questions. And I feel like from an inquisitive mindset, that's how you learn and that's how you grow.
I agree. And I know that obviously I'm not a panelist here, but I just want to add to that, your raw skills are so important too, but being kind to others and the way you present yourself and the way you come across, holds just as much weight, sometimes if not more, in school and in the workplace. So while you're learning to figure out what you want to do, professionally or in school, make sure that you're meeting people and holding strong relationships with people, because really that's what life's about, is having those connections outside of your job too. So
absolutely.
Thank you guys. I appreciate everyone here. I know we ran a little bit ahead, but if there's a couple questions, Laura, maybe the panelists can take a minute or two to just answer them. So if you guys have any questions, feel free to just throw it in the Q&A, and then Laura, our chapter chair, can read them out for the panelists.
We don't have any questions yet, but hopefully they're quickly typing.
Don't be afraid. This is the first step in learning more about your future. Oh, it looks like, oh, go ahead, Laura.
How does your typical workday look?
Is that for everyone? Like everyone can go ahead.
Since I'm off mute, I can start. So I work from home most days. Sometimes I go into the office. We have labs in the seaport with office space. So when I go into the office, I often talk to our scientists about what they're working on, how that's progressing. I do have a lot of Zoom meetings when I'm working from home. I'm sometimes talking to other companies about potential collaborations. Other times I'm meeting with our scientists to see how their projects are going, if it's on time, what the challenges are, and helping them to solve some of those challenges.
Dr. Nyavor, do you want to go next? I saw you smiling.
I was smiling because my day sounds very similar to Cecilia's day, with a lot of meetings. I also work from home some of the time. So when I'm working from home, it's a lot of Zoom meetings or Google Meets, just virtual meetings, a lot of deep dive reading. So this goes back to the lifelong learning that Cecilia mentioned. Believe it or not, a PhD does not give you all the knowledge in the world. So sad. I know I burst your bubble on that one. I'm sorry. You do not become the all, knowing person just from having a PhD. You actually just realize you learn the skills needed to learn more. So that's basically what I do for my job on a daily basis. Is I'm always researching something, digging into something, reading papers, writing protocols or methods, training people, running experiments. So my days look very different. Each day can look very different from the next one, but I kind of enjoy it because of the change in pace for each of the days. But all of it, a lot of it is filled with lifelong learning and relationships, just people, working with people. So I will say that being able to work really well with people is going to serve you well, regardless of what role you choose.
Couldn't agree more. And Priya, what about you?
With me, emails and meetings, like everybody else, that's become like a part of everyone's workday now. And working in IT, there's a lot of problems. Everyone reports a lot of issues. That is something part of my day-to-day job responsibility, to work with the team to resolve those issues. And sometimes it could be, not sometimes, like most of the times it could be that somebody in the company coming to me and asking that, I want to do something. I'm writing a new software application, and I want to host it in the cloud. Tell me how do I do that? So we all like, I get on a call with either our Amazon consultants, web services, or Google consultants, figure out how to start a new server, host this application, and give access to everyone so they can access the application that's being developed by the software engineer. So there's a lot of, problem solving and figuring out how to do things in the cloud. That's like my day to day.
Awesome.
We have another question.
Go ahead.
The question is, do you have to study mathematics if you study chemistry or biology in college? And she says, thanks for this opportunity.
I did take mathematics, not too many courses though. For biology at my college, it was just 1 or 2 courses. But because I was also a finance major, I took more statistics. So if you consider statistics as part of mathematics, then yes, there would have been like 4 or 5 courses total.
I guess I can, go ahead, Priya. I think you were
I'm going to say in honor of Pi Day tomorrow, I'm going to say that math is helpful. It's a great tool. No matter whether you do research in chemistry or biology, you're going to generate a lot of data from doing experiments, and having the knowledge of math, just, the fundamental concepts is going to be helpful in making sense out of that data, the huge amount of data that gets generated. So it's helpful.
It's true. And I'm just going to add, because I was a chemistry major in college, that chemistry, a lot of people don't realize, is actually a lot of applied physics. And but it's really cool physics. It's things like, how do nuclear reactors work, or how fast do electrons move around something. So it is a lot of math, but it's very cool how it's applied. I think you'll retain it a lot more, understanding what it's being applied to.
As a biology major who also loves math, well, I didn't always love math, so I should give that background. And so I'm saying, number one, please don't be scared of math. Math is actually really neat when you get to a certain point and you start to understand it. So if you don't like math for a specific reason, maybe talk to someone that you trust, kind of back to what has been shared earlier. If there's a mentor who's been rooting for you, maybe ask them about it, see if there's a way you can get to a point where you still kind of enjoy it. As a biology major, you do need math. I use math every single day for work, so that's why I was smiling so much. I use so much math. I did a lot of statistics during my PhD that I ended up using a lot of it for work as well. So just having a lot of that fundamental mathematics skills are extremely useful for being able to work in a lab from a day-to-day basis, even as a biologist. It's going to be invaluable for you to have. So if you don't like math for whatever reason, I will please try to encourage you and say math is super cool. It's very logical, has all these rules that once you understand, it's just straightforward. So talk to someone that you trust about it and see if you can work through that, is what I would recommend.
I'm going to specify a name of a website that I recently came across. It's called brilliant.org, I believe. It's a great way to learn, cool way to learn calculus and any other concepts, actually. There is like graphical visualization tools that they have to learn math concepts, if anybody is interested in checking that out.
Priya, did you say brilliant.org?
Yes, that's what I believe, and I can confirm that, and I can send it to you by email. So
okay, perfect. And we can send it out to anyone. Does anyone else have any questions? Okay, so thank you so much to the panelists, for all of you taking your time out today. This was a great discussion. We talked about so many things about your background and being women and being women of color and all these amazing fields and things you do every day. And thank you to YWIB for putting this. This is our first event. So if you guys had fun, please come to more. And lastly, I just want to say that I'm putting a link to a survey in the chat. So if everyone who attended can just fill out this really brief survey for us, it'll kind of help us figure out, what next we should bring to you. And yeah, so with that, thank you, everyone. Have a good night.
And if you missed the survey link, we'll try to send it to you.
Sounds great. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Bye.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you all.